conversations that matter most are usually the ones people avoid. And Mr. Scott Harvey is here to set us straight. He's a former FBI trained hostage negotiator, and he is going to reveal to us how to lead confidently when every word counts. We're here on the Marketer of the Day podcast with Robert Plank. We're brought to you by dfypodcast.com. We handle the podcast backend editing, publishing, and promotion so you can focus on the interview. And the interview that we're going to be focusing on today is this man who has negotiated under extreme pressure. He has a book called Silence Kills, and he can tell us how to perhaps earn trust fast and get to a reasonable conclusion, right? Negotiate, communicate, all those things that you hear that like speakers need and that law enforcement need. And you think in those extreme cases, if this guy can figure it out for them, then for the rest of us who just have to maybe get an app launched or get a meeting figured out, then this should be a piece of cake, hopefully, ideally. So Mr. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm fabulous. I'm excited to talk to you because like this whole idea of like people and communication, at first I dread it, right? Because I think like, oh, great, we'll talk about like body language or the words we use. But then once we get into it and you talk about people and some of the clever techniques or the breakthroughs, like it becomes interesting once we get into the thick of it, I believe.
Yeah, it's definitely a science, and it's something that I would say it's a science. To me, it's more of an art. People tell me that they come to my trainings, they bring me in to train their teams. They're like, we want the formula. Like, wouldn't that be nice if we could just apply this formula to every interaction we have? It's more of a dance. It's more of an art to how are they responding to what I'm saying? What do I need to be saying next while still listening to what they're saying? How am I interpreting their body language? What body language am I putting out? All of that stuff. And as a speaker on a stage, I'm getting that from my audience. I'm looking for times that they lean in, and then I need to press more in that situation. And I need to look for times where they just kind of look sideways at me like they're not getting what I'm saying. So I need to clarify. I need to rewind what I said just a few minutes ago and clarify what I said because it's not landing with them. This is very much a dance between at least two people. I tell people all the time, if there's no listener, there's no story. So you can share stories all day, but if there's nobody there to interpret those stories, you're not communicating anything.
Right. And then what's the point? And it seems like that is something that I want to avoid now more than ever in this AI world, right? With the AI slop, and it's like no one's watching it or reading it. And then even the creators, they're not even reading or watching it because they can just so easily click a button and crank all this stuff out. So we need to get that humanity back. And, when I was in college, I took these communication classes, and we have all had to take something like that. And they say like, well, the words you speak, that's only 7%. And I didn't really believe that or understand that at the time, because I thought like, okay, well, if I took like a still snapshot of this moment, like, sure, my face is this way, my body's that way, but is it really like 93% left over? What you just said there's like the bigger picture, right? There's like what I said before and after, and are the people like paying attention? Am I losing them? Am I going too slow, going too fast pacing? So I pile all that and I'm like, whoa, I guess there is a lot more to communicating than just the words.
Yeah, the rest of that stat, 7% is the words, 38% is our tone. So how we say what we say is way more important than what we actually say. And the other 55% is our body language. So the tone is the big one, because tone comes across on just an audible podcast like this or the video. You can see the nonverbals that I'm using. But tone also comes through on an old school phone call. So if you have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, I tell them all the time, don't send them an email. Don't shoot them a text. If you can't get on Zoom or on some type of video conferencing platform, pick up the phone and call them, because you will get at least 45% of the message across that way. Because we in the corporate world and in the coaching world and the speaking, we're so worried about saying the wrong thing. And I tell people all the time that saying the wrong thing isn't as important or isn't as damaging as saying nothing at all. And so start the conversation, get it out there. Your tone will communicate more than your words ever do. So don't script it out. Don't write it out. Do a few bullet points if you're going to have a one-on-one with a team member or something like that. Don't script it out, because in the AI-driven world, to your point, that feels inauthentic. It doesn't feel human. And trust your tone to convey, this is a hard conversation, but at the end of it, we're both going to be better.
Nice. So focus on that goal, that desired positive outcome. And you're saying that a lot of it is avoiding the minds blowing up on you in that. And we've all had that where we don't remember anything that was said in a conversation or a presentation or whatever, except for like that one thing. You're like, that one thing that put me off, or that's where I stopped listening, or I didn't even notice anything else except for like, why did he do that weird thing? So people are kind of messy, but you're saying be authentic and have that phone call. And even with the AI-ness, I'm like, well, I would be a fool to not use any AI, to like go back in time and not use it. But I find like the way, I don't know about you, but the way I use it kind of changes every few weeks. And lately I've been doing it more for like rehearsal purposes. I say, well, if I'm going to like write this article or have this conversation or do this video, I'm like, just play out for me how I do it. I look at it, I say, okay, like I like that, I don't like that. And then I kind of rewind the timeline and then I do it the way I want, kind of having those extra ideas just like floating in my head. And like, I'm not going to do a script. I'm just kind of, I did a dry run and then now here's where we're doing it in real life. And so there's so many places to go with this, right? You've seen so much with like your hostage negotiation. Like, what do you think is the real problem these days with communication?
I think the biggest problem today is we live in a world that doesn't ask you to listen much. The TLDR is a huge thing. Too long, didn't read. You send me the email, it was too long. The social media post, it was too long. Because I'm supposed to be producing content. I'm not supposed to be consuming content. And so listening today is so rare, it's like a superpower. But I tell people all the time, when I was a hostage negotiator, I never talked somebody into doing anything. I listened them into doing what I needed them to do. And the only way you do that is you ask good questions. You actually listen to their answers. You ask deeper level questions. They give you an answer. You're like, oh, that makes sense to me. Tell me more about that. Because the more I can ask you questions, Robert, and the more I can listen to your responses and learn about you, the more likely I can craft a solution to the problem you find yourself in today that allows you to check as many of your win boxes as possible. And when I negotiated, that's what I did with people. If I found out that their kids were an important part of their life, or they really cared about their mom, what their mom thought about them, or something like that, we would start talking about that. What would your mom tell you to do in this situation? We're here where we are. We can't control the past. How do we make the next 5 minutes something your mom would be proud of? And my boy made some poor choices, but he decided at that point that he was done and he was going to start making some better choices. And when I can find out what you value, what's important to you in the business world, maybe it's your family's security. I want to make sure that your family feels very secure with you working on my team. And so that may mean I send a gift card to your spouse every now and then to say, your spouse is killing it at work. Take them out to dinner on me. It's on me. And I send it to the spouse instead of giving it to you, because that communicates to the family. They're doing important work when they're at the office and they appreciate them at the office. And this gift card is now date night for us. And those are the things, when I know that about you, that's what you value, then that's something that's going to keep you on my team, even if somebody is offering you $1 more an hour to come to them. I think that's part of the problems with the remote work environment today. I work in my home office. That's where I'm sitting today. And if somebody offered me $1 more an hour in the corporate world to work from this same office, why would I not do it? I wouldn't do it if I felt like this was my tribe, this was my team. And that comes from my leaders and my coworkers really listening to me. So if you do nothing else in the world today, in the world of communication, make sure you are a great listener. Take notes on those things. My older brother travels a lot for his job, just like I do. And he told me a few months ago, Robert, he said, I checked into a hotel. He goes, I don't normally stay in this chain. He said, but there weren't many hotels to choose from. So I checked into this hotel. And he goes, I walked up to the counter at 10 o'clock at night. They said, Mr. Harvey, we're so glad you're here. We know you loved our cookies the last time. And so we saved you some cookies. They didn't have any, but they had them behind the counter for him. And he told me, he goes, I remembered at that point 6 months ago in another city in this hotel chain, I made a comment about, I love your cookies. He goes, somebody somewhere entered that into the CRM. They listened to him. And when he was in another city 6 months later, they saved a couple of cookies. It cost them $0, but he now prefers to stay at that hotel chain because they listened to him.
Very nice. That's some multiplication. I don't know how to exactly articulate it, but it's like, I'm sure that there was like something put into the employee manual, right? Of just like listen a little bit, just like put, 20 seconds of your CPU brain and then updates like something in the CRM. And then just that one little tweak, then like now they get the repeat business. And that's so cool. And I've noticed that like slightly more in the past few years. Like I'll go to just some random place, like to go get a haircut, right? And like yesterday, the lady was like, "Well, so your son's not here today," and I was like, wait a second, like I don't think I've been here when this lady's been here, but a similar idea, right? Someone put an entry in the CRM, and it's like it'd be great for all of us to replicate that, right? Because I know that you and I met a few weeks ago doing like a pre-call, and the AI note taker did something, but I didn't have like the recurring follow-up discipline to go back in there and update the CRM. And I know like there's so many people that like I should be following up with, right? And I should be like dedicating spaces of time to do this updating of the CRM, but it's so hard to, I don't know, add that to the habit stack. So do you have any ideas on that? If someone says, okay, what Scott says, it's a great idea, but it's so tough just to, like, to find the extra time and space to do it. So like, what's your advice?
Yeah, I think, the fortunes are in the follow-up. You've heard that before, right? And so the CRM helps me with my follow-up. And I had a meeting last week with a potential client who was very honest. And he told me, he goes, you know what? Your first two emails I ignored. I said, which makes you like most people. Most people don't. I'm cold emailing people every day. I'm also nurturing existing relationships that I have. I do both. But cold email this guy twice. He didn't email me back. And he goes, but the third time, he goes, I opened it up when I was dealing with a communication frustration. He's the COO of a company. And he said, I was tired of people saying, I told them they should know that. So they felt like they were being communicated, or they felt like they were getting a message across, but it wasn't being received by their team. And he said, so I opened it up during that time. I said, well, you open it up during the 18% of our payroll that is spent on miscommunication. Because there's the research is out there that says, 18% is spent on miscommunication. And so when we type those things into the CRM, when we type notes into our computer, or we even handwrite notes during a conversation, we're regaining some of that 18%. And when you look at some of these big companies, 18% of their payroll is seven figures easily. And so when I work with companies, I tell them all the time, when I can teach you some tactics and some techniques, it'll start reclaiming just half of that 18%. That's a huge ROI on your investment. And so use the CRM to remind you. And when I send follow-up emails to people, I tell them, I know you're busy, so I choose to own the follow-up for my clients. That's one less thing you have to remember. I give them a snapshot of what it looks like to work with me. I will take care of this for you. I will make sure that these communication things go out. I will make sure that I'm at your meetings. I will make sure I'm taking notes because you're super busy. Now, the opposite side of that coin, Robert, is I'm busy too. But I'm asking them to hire me, and I need to show them what it is I'm going to take off their plate. And I'm going to take communication problems from them, and we'll start recovering some of that 18% really quickly. And that happens with taking notes. Like you said, the AI note taker is a great tool. But I also use AI before I go into meetings with people. I say, I'm going to meet with this person with this company. Tell me about them and their company. And within 5 seconds, I learned their company was voted best place to work in their state the last 5 years in a row. That's a great lead in that conversation to ask them, I understand you're best place to work the last 5 years in a row. How does that happen? And when they tell me how that happens, a lot of times it's communication related topics. And I'm like, that means you're already a great communicator. You're already this much above your competition. What if we took you to the next level? And those are the things that AI does for me. They're my research assistant, my marketing team to an extent, my graphic design sometimes. My youngest daughter's a graphic designer, so she does my stuff that I don't want to look AI-ish, the more important things. But a quick slide and a presentation, AI is doing that for me. Just like I would send it out to my design team. But you've got to listen to people, you've got to take notes, and you've got to remind them that you were listening.
Very nice. That's about 6 or 7 harsh truths that are important to pile on us, right? That we need to listen. And that seems to be like the theme, right? Like listening is this lost art that we need to make sure that we kind of keep our listening skills up, as silly and as like almost like passive as that seems. But if we can really like notice those things and do a little bit of research, have a little bit of discipline, that we can have these real results. And you're mentioning like all these things like, well, I know that I'm dumber than I think I am. And I think the average person's kind of dumb. And I don't know if it's like actual dumbness or just from being so busy that, like you mentioned, but it's like we try to notice things, but we only notice a handful of things. And it seems like it's so important to like stay top of mind, right? It's like if someone like you said, you follow up and someone's like, oh yeah, communication, yeah, sure, whatever. But then when there's a problem, then because you've followed up and you've been around, they're like, oh, hey, that guy Scott Harvey, like it wasn't that urgent then, but it is now because he just kind of educated us and warmed us up, and now it's time to like use his services and take action. So it's a fun nuance and a dance and a game that you're playing here. And I'm so in awe of your communication skills, because even like a few weeks ago I looked you up, right, and it's like you're like a TEDx speaker growing in a lab. It seems like it didn't matter what YouTube video I went to, I'd scroll to something and it's like, oh, there's the story about like something about like a boat and his brother or something, or here's a story about like putting these amount of years into his career and then doing the speaking in the book to bridge the gap. And I'm like, man, like there's stories everywhere you go, and they're all fascinating. So does the charisma factor, I guess, does that like come naturally, or did you have to work at it, or like how do we like replicate this cool skill?
People have asked me before, how did you become a hostage negotiator? I said, because I was the middle of three boys. And as the middle brother, that's the peacekeeper, right? The older one's never been wrong. He's the smartest human that ever walked the planet. The third one is like the class clown. He's like the family mascot, all that stuff. And they would conflict, and I was just the peacekeeper in the middle. But as far as the communication stuff, I realized that I was doing that fairly early on in the police world. I not only became a hostage negotiator, I became a media relations officer. So I'm talking to the media, I'm doing press releases, I'm telling the stories of the things we're doing. But I also became a DARE officer. So I'm in the classroom with fifth graders and seventh graders teaching the DARE program all day, every day, later on in my career. I started one day a week for that while I was on patrol. And so I realized very quickly in that world that stories are how you get messages across. And I started really geeking out on story, and I started researching story. And if you think about it, Robert, we've used story before there was written word.
Oh yeah.
Everything was verbal, told. There were storytellers that were very popular that told stories. And that's how we taught concepts, fables, fairy tales. They all had some kernel of truth to them that the creator wanted us to remember. Because I tell people, if you tell a 5-year-old slow and steady wins the race, they will forget that as soon as they turn around and run off. But if you tell them a story about a tortoise and a hare, and there's struggle and there's drama and there's intrigue, they will remember the principle of that story for the rest of their life. Story is such a primal thing in us. And so I am an unashamed collector of stories. I am all the time collecting stories. And you made a comment earlier about we notice these things and we don't do anything with them. I would tell you, you notice them, you don't take note of them. And so I would encourage you, when you notice something that strikes your fancy or that's weird, make note of it. Write it down, do a voice memo on your phone or something like that. Play that voice memo later, read that note. If it doesn't make sense, it's either probably not a good story or you didn't capture it well enough. But if you read it later, you listen to it later, and you're like, that kind of makes sense to me, then I would encourage that to become a social media post to gauge engagement with people who respond. Does this resonate with my audience? If it does, then it probably moves to the podcast platform. It's a story that I share from the podcast platform to see if I get feedback from people. And that's how we test stories. And I tell anybody that comes to me that wants to be a speaker, I tell them, I say, you got to collect stories. And then what you do is you weave those stories together to make a quilt large enough to cover your audience. And you do that with a plan of the stories I'm going to share. But then you watch your audience and you say, okay, they liked this. They laughed here. So I've got them laughing with me. If I can get them laughing with me in the beginning, I know they'll cry with me at the end. And I don't apologize for my presentations being emotional. Because the other thing about story and about teaching, Robert, is if I can tie it to an emotion, you'll remember it longer. And I believe these communication tactics that I teach from the stage and I teach to organizations will make their lives better if they do them. So I'm doing them a disservice if I don't help them remember it. And stories that are emotional will help them remember those principles, and they'll become better communicators.
It's a fascinating subject, the art and science of storytelling, right? That the Aesop, things like Aesop's fables and all these, like they're just, we've all heard them and it's like universal. And then the yin and the yang, the art and the science, it's like, well, you say, well, I'm piecing together the squares of the quilt. So like the goals or the mechanics are the assignments, the tasks. That's the science part. But then within that box, you say, well, let me play with it, right? Let me figure out what kind of stories I can tell, and then you go back to the science. And it's like the comedians testing out their material, right? Like a stand-up comedian, they'll go West Coast to East Coast, all these little podunk cities, and they'll try out the different jokes. And then once they get it all refined, then they'll do the album, or then they'll do the stand-up special. And it's fun to think about us as speakers, thought leaders, authors, whatever, playing comedian in that way, right? It takes the mundane. If I'm just an accountant or a business person, and I'm like, hey, well, I'm testing out my material, it turns it into something that's more fun, and it kind of adds the magic spark in ourselves that we're looking for, and then we can help others. So it's just such a cool profession that you found yourself in, Mr. Scott Harvey. But I want to make sure, since I'm doing my best to keep up with you on the listening front, that we talk about what's important to you. So in this conversation we're having, do you think there might be a missing question that I should be asking you? I just don't know what to ask you.
I think that the biggest issue I deal with when I speak from a stage or when I train companies is the main message I want them to understand is silence without rapport feels like we don't care. A lot of times we as leaders become silent because we don't want to say the wrong thing. That's a good thing on our part. Like, I don't want to offend my team member. I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I don't say anything at all. An example is, let's say, a team member has a family tragedy or something like that. They've been off for a week or so, and they come back and you're just like, I'm so sorry. And then you leave it at that. That just almost comes off as if you don't care. Where if you actually ask them about it, tell me about this, how are you doing, what happened, and you have a 20-minute conversation with them, they will know that you care. And the fact that we're being silent, even if it's a workplace issue, there's drama between these two people, and I as the leader don't bring it up, then it feels to those two people like I don't care. Where I'm not bringing it up because I don't want to get into the drama myself. Honestly, I'm afraid of throwing gas on that fire. So I don't bring it up out of a good intention on my part, but to them, it feels like I don't care. So break the silence, have the conversation, show that you care, because saying the wrong thing at least feels like you're trying. Saying nothing feels like you don't care.
Ooh, nice. That's an interesting tweak. So it's have that rapport and show that you care. And so it's so many different layers to this and so many things we've talked about. And I'm sure someone is chomping at the bit and saying, okay, well, now I've got like 8 or 12 ideas about how I can enhance my communication, my storytelling, get better results for myself, my team, so much more. Where do you fit into someone's future plans? What's the service? How does someone find out more about you?
Yeah, I speak all the time, not only from stages at conferences, but in boardrooms, in front of teams. I train teams all of the time. And then sometimes once I train those teams, the company's like, hey, that resonated so well. We want you to continue working with us. And so I do communication advising. I'm sitting in on staff meetings. I'm coaching CEOs and COOs and the top leadership. After the staff meeting, I'm contacting them saying, here's the body language I picked up from you in case that's not what you were intending to do. Or how you said that thing the next time we might say it a little bit differently. Or even HR has to call somebody in for a difficult conversation. They can pick up the phone and call me and I'll say, tell me the story. What do we want them to get across? And we'll come up with a game plan for that conversation. So once we start improving communication in companies, as I said, the ROI is huge, because 18% of our payroll is spent on miscommunication. So I work with companies and advise them. I also facilitate a mastermind. I do individual coaching. I just help people raise their level of communication, because I believe we will never be more successful than our ability to appropriately communicate. And when we start raising our ability to communicate, success follows every time.
Very inspiring. It's a much needed service. And so if someone says, well, I want to check out the book or the website, etc., what are some next steps?
They can go to speakingofharvey.com. That tells them everything they need to know about the trainings that I do, what consulting can look like for their company. There's a contact Scott button on there. I recommend they reach out to me, because a lot of the consulting and advising I do is very custom. Not every company has the same issues. And so we customize the work to that particular company. Silence Kills is available on Amazon. I think it's like 50% off right now, which is, they set that price. I don't. So really good rate at Silence Kills on Amazon. Go check that out.
Very nice. So that book you mentioned, Silence Kills: Communication Tactics to Speak with Confidence and Build Your Influence. And in there, Mr. Scott Harvey discusses the hidden consequences of silence, how stress and fear impact a message, the secret superpower of great communicators, building trust and rapport, delivering a message the right way, be prepared in any situation, all the things that you'd expect like a cop or a hostage negotiator to do, but then we apply it to our own everyday workplace life and get some amazing results. And then that website that you mentioned as well is speakingofharvey.com. And that's how you can get those lines of communication started with 15 plus years of paid presentations to hundreds of thousands of people. And if you want to book Scott for your event or solve some problems in your organization, he is the guy to talk to. Speakingofharvey.com. And as I said before, Mr. Harvey, I'm just in awe of the polish and the preparation, also balanced with the authenticity and the storytelling. You're what every podcast guest should aspire to be. And in the spirit of that, it's time for the scary finale of our show, where I try to stump you, I try to put you on the spot by asking about a fun or interesting quote or lesson that has served you. So what comes to mind as far as a fun or interesting quote or lesson?
Every now and then I'll find a quote that's really inspiring. I'll put it on a Post-it note and I'll put it on my computer monitor right in front of me. And one that I wrote down about 2 years ago was from Mark Pope, who's the Kentucky basketball coach. I'm a huge Kentucky basketball fan, and he was talking to his team in the locker room. And the camera was in there, and he said, "Everybody's jealous about where you are. Nobody's jealous about how you got there."
Ooh.
Because in my world, I stand on stages a lot. I do podcast interviews like this. I do a lot of spotlight work. That's about 5% of my work. The other 95% is sitting behind my computer in the office, doing the work behind the scenes that nobody ever sees. And it's this type of work that people don't want to do. And so they'll never find their way to the spotlight.
Nice. So yeah, there's a lot to that. So we need, people will be jealous, and we might be jealous of others, but there's a lot that goes in that you don't see. So it's like, get it figured out, solve some problems. And so to solve these communication problems that we're mentioning, effective communication, resolving conflict, mental health, storytelling, so much more, speakingofharvey.com to find out more about this super cool human being. So we'll see you there. And thanks so much, Mr. Scott Harvey, for entertaining and educating us. I'm really impressed, and I'm glad that you showed up.
Thank you for having me, Robert. I appreciate it.